everyone, if you like the channel, please consider subscribing. It means a ton. Thanks so much. Enjoy the video.
My name is Stephen Drake, and welcome to the first lesson in this shed hunting masterclass. In this lesson, I'm just going to do some shed antlers 101, answer some common questions, what are sheds, why do they fall off, etc., and just kind of establish a baseline. So first off, what are shed antlers? Deer and elk grow a new set of antlers every single year, and when those antlers fall off, we call those sheds. Or shed antlers, another common term, is casts. Antlers are made of bone, and they're one of the fastest growing organic substances on Earth. The growth period for a new set of antlers, it's usually a 3-month period, which is usually May, June, July. In August, antler growth usually stops, and that's when a deer elk, their testosterone levels really start to increase, and that's when they're gonna shed the velvet on their antlers and get their antlers ready for the rut or the breeding season. They'll sharpen them up, get them ready for fighting, as well as attracting a mate. So when I say velvet, that's the dark brown fuzzy stuff on the outside of the antlers that's on the antler during the growing season. Antlers will fall off when an animal's testosterone level has reached its lowest point. So when their testosterone level reaches basically zero, the fusion between the antler and the skull, that connection point basically pulls apart and the antler falls off. So right when those antlers fall off, if you were to find the shed, often the sheds are going to have a big bloody base on them. Basically the open wound on top of the deer elk skull right here is going to be bloody, and that's because there's blood vessels going right through there. When that elk or deer antler is actually growing in the summer months, there's blood pumping right out of the top of the skull through blood vessels going up into the antler. And again, when they drop, they'll be bloody on the base. It's one term you'll often hear in the shed hunting world is people referring to bloody bases, and that bloody base on the base of either the antler or the top of the skull, that is what they're referring to. So most deer are going to reach a low point in their testosterone level, usually a couple months after they rut. So in most of North America, most deer, both whitetail and mule deer, are going to be rutting in November. And so their low point in testosterone will be like January, February, and that's usually when they start dropping their antlers. Elk, on the other hand, they usually reach a low point in their testosterone quite a bit later into spring. It's usually like 6 or 7 months after they rut. So in the United States, for elk, they're going to reach their low point in their testosterone, and most antlers are going to be falling off of elk's heads in April. There's always exceptions to either rule. You know, often the really big bulls or even big bucks will drop a little bit earlier than the rest. Some will drop a little bit later, but as a good general time frame, April is like that primary month when most sheds are hitting the ground. So in this course, I don't really talk about moose sheds so much. I'm pretty centric on deer and elk, especially deer elk out in the West. But the principles and tactics that I'll be sharing for deer and elk really are the same for moose. And with moose, they're going to drop their antlers, also referred to as paddles, usually in that January, February timeframe. So what's the difference between an antler and a horn? Moose, caribou, deer, elk, those 4 species all have antlers, and antlers are something the animals grow a new set every single year. Versus horns, they remain intact with the animal for the lifespan of that animal, and they continue growing throughout their entire life. Animals that have horns are goats, sheep, and bison. So with shed hunting and pretty much anything that anyone does that you get really in deep with, there's a lot of lingo and stuff that's very unique to that subject. So in shed hunting, there are quite a few terms that are unique. First off, brown gold. Fresh antlers, they usually have a brown appearance, and gold because it's kind of like finding the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's a very rare thing and something to be celebrated, so brown gold. White gold is also a term people use a lot. I find this one kind of funny because usually the value, both intrinsic and monetary value of an antler goes down quite a bit after they turn white. After an antler sits in the sun for probably 3+ months, it eventually gets sun bleached and it turns white. So when someone says white gold, they're just referring to a bleached out antler. This next one is a pretty funny term, brown town. Someone's like, I'm going to Brown Town. They're referring to like, oh, I found the pocket where there was a bunch of elk sheds here, there was a bunch of deer sheds here, there was a bunch of fresh sheds here. I found the zone. Along similar lines, the next term is called bone zone. It's finding the zone where you find all the antlers or bones in. So the next term is horn hunting. Most shed hunters, they won't actually refer to shed hunting as shed hunting. They'll refer to it as horn hunting. We all know that we're not looking for horns, we're actually looking for antlers. I think it's just horn hunting is easier to say. If we were actually horn hunting, we'd be out there looking for sheep or goat or bison horns, which doesn't really make sense because those things don't fall off of animals. And the last term is burr. And the burr is basically the connection point between the base of the antler and the top of the skull. The burrs they're pretty interesting. A lot of them are very unique to each animal. Some will have some kind of weird little divots in them. Some will just be all weird and funky. So the burr is definitely something that shed hunters, they'll ask about the burr. Oh, what'd the burr look like? What was its size? If you find multiple sheds off of a bull, the burrs on each of those, on all the different years, are going to be dang near identical. If one burr has some unique little notch in it, the next year it's almost guaranteed it's going to have that same notch. So that was just a little bit of shed hunting or horn hunting 101, just trying to establish a baseline here. So do note that this course is pretty centric to finding elk sheds, but most of what I'm going to be sharing really applies to any animal that sheds their antlers. So that concludes lesson number 1. We'll see you in the next one.